Welcome to the Dyslexia is Our Superpower podcast with Gibby Booth Jasper, where we hear from fellow dyslexians looking at the positives dyslexia has to offer and the many ways to succeed as a person with dyslexia.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back. I'm Gibby Booth Jasper, and today I am talking with Cheri Rae, who's a journalist and advocate for her dyslexic son, as well as children and families in the community, and former dyslexic consultant with the local Santa Barbara Unified School District. Welcome, Cheri Rae.
Hi, Gibby. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. I really appreciate you being here. Well, let's start at the beginning. And can you sort of tell me what happened with your dyslexic son? How did you guys figure out he was dyslexic? Was that early on?
You know, if I'd known the signs earlier, I would have known earlier, but it took a really long time. I mean, he was always a very active boy. He was very interested in sports, not so much in school, but he was very lucky because he went to an alternative elementary school where it was very child-centered, and so it really met his needs, except for learning to read. And we fooled around for years, literally years, had him finally tested in third grade. And we got he was then, supposed to be in special ed and with specific learning disability. But I had no idea what specific learning disability was. And it took a while. It took like 3-4 years more to figure out that was dyslexia. So once we knew it was dyslexia, then I just went full on and learned everything I possibly could and got this kid some help because it was so awful. What I realized was he was never going to be able to go to high school, and he was a big baseball player. The only reason he would go to school was so that, he could play baseball. And so I figured, he was in 7th grade reading at a 2nd grade level, and I just went ballistic. And what ended up happening was the school district agreed to pay for him to go to Lindenwood Bell, which was almost, unbelievable. Then I felt really guilty about it because I'm like, why is he getting this and other kids aren't? So that's when I decided to become an advocate, not just for him, but for everybody else, and to try to change the system so they wouldn't do that anymore, but they would teach kids properly from the beginning.
Awesome. Yeah. And was it at first, when you first kind of started to learn about it, I mean, it was completely foreign, right? You had no frame of reference, no one that you knew was dyslexic?
Absolutely. My son's adopted, and, it is a hereditary issue, and it doesn't run in our families. My husband and I are both publishers and writers and editors, and the written word comes easy to us. So we'd never seen anything like this. Now I think he was brought to us for all kinds of special reasons. And it's very cool.
I love that.
Professionally, for me to realize that, it really doesn't matter about spelling and particular commas and, all the right things, because it's been very freeing, actually, to have him as a son, which is very cool.
Aw. Yeah. I love that. And was it always looked at as a positive, or was it not so much of a positive angle on it?
When we thought it was specific learning disability, actually the definition of that is very troubling. And so I just tried to get comfortable with this idea that he was going to be more limited in his life than I ever imagined. There was not a single positive word, and certainly no one's ever heard of a role model with specific learning disability. No one. And so I just didn't know. Although I knew he was incredibly creative, he was very active, he was very accomplished with sports, and he was like the kindest, sweetest person. And so I'm like, well, we'll just do our best for him. And then I was actually at a Jonathan Mooney seminar, and Jonathan Mooney was pacing this stage and talking about his dyslexia. And I'm sitting there going, wait a minute, this sounds a lot like what my son has here. Yeah. And then I started putting the two together. And then I was like, I can't believe we've been stuck in this place, chasing around and not knowing what's really going on with this kid.
Awesome. And then did you find, because of your journalism background, that it was very easy to kind of dive into research mode and to figure out all you could about dyslexia?
Yeah, I was kicking myself that I hadn't done it sooner. I mean, it was like, why didn't I do a lot of research on specific learning disability? I don't know. I mean, I would have learned, but we're talking more than 10 years ago, and things were a little bit different then. There wasn't quite as much. I'm sure the information was on the internet. I just didn't look at it. I didn't even know to that was it. But once I got into research mode, there was no stopping me. And so I wrote a big cover story for our local paper about his dyslexia. And it was 10 years ago. And that was, it was about the one mother's journey kind of a thing. Like that. And so that was kind of like when I decided, I need to do this, not just as a mom, but as a journalist and as an advocate for other kids.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And then from there, talk to me. You've just come out with this wonderful book called Dyslexia Land, a field guide for parents of children with dyslexia. Talk to me about how that came about.
That's actually the second version of that book. It started out as a tiny little purse-sized book with a fold-out map, because I really liked the idea of having a small bit of information that people could have in their purse. And the original map had like one dark side and one light side, and one was very bright and happy, and one was dark and swirly. But and that was before he graduated from high school, so I didn't have full knowledge of what this whole 13-year journey was. So once he graduated from high school, I felt like, I've really been through this journey and I can help other parents get there too. And so I wanted to share that information. And with my background, I've written many guidebooks. And so I was like, well, how about the guidebook idea? My husband is a hiking author, and he it was kind of his idea to kind of like help me really focus in on all of what it takes to create a guidebook. And it is kind of like entering a strange land that you never expected to be in. So that's why it's that kind of an approach.
Awesome. And talk to me a little bit as far as, how did you come up with the, it's certainly a guidebook, but as far as the Dyslexia Land, can you talk to me more about the title and how that came about?
It just seemed to me it's a different place. There's like, one, there's no guides. Two, there's a different language. There are rules that you don't know about. There's a history, a political culture, economics, and it all just kind of made sense. This is a place that you enter, and it's like your child takes you there. You don't even intend to end up there. You just do. And so I can use the analogy of feeling like a stranger in a strange land. And thinking about it that way, it seemed a nice tool to use to help other parents kind of get oriented to this terrain that they never expected to be traveling in. That's why I came up with it.
Yeah, I love it. And as far as, the first version and then transitioning to the second version, did you sort of feel like, there's just so much more that I can tell people and that I've learned? And is that sort of the reason for the sort of the full-fledged book?
Yeah, I think I gained more confidence in it because I wouldn't say I'm an expert, but I've certainly had so much experience and research and practical knowledge that I need to share because, I'm one of those parents that's gone through the whole thing and I haven't gotten burned out yet. And I know a lot of people do. And so there feels like there's this, I have to share this information because I know how many parents are, have children who are 8 years old and they're thinking about this what do I do for my child? And they're freaking out about it. And I hope that I can be kind of an older mom that's a more stabilizing influence. That's like, it's going to be okay because and you care and you're going to do something about it. And it might not be this year, but it's okay because they have a long time to go.
Absolutely. So tell me how you kind of went from, obviously you're a mom of a dyslexic kid, and then you're helping other people and other families in the same situation. How did you then go to being the dyslexic consultant for the school district?
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, it's a lovely story.
We had an advocate who preceded me in my community, and I watched her, and she helped mentor me. But what I recognized was that she was very confrontational. She was very angry, and she'd been doing this for years and years and years. And I understand why she was so angry, but I also saw she wasn't getting any results. And so it's kind of more my style to be more collaborative and more, to get along better. So I thought, and I honestly thought when I got that private settlement for Linda Moon Bell, I thought, oh, this is unusual, and I can really help teach them things that they need to know. I didn't know at that point that they do that all the time, and they just don't tell anybody about it. It's just a big secret. So I thought that I could be helpful, and I was. And I was very, very lucky. It's all, sometimes everything's about timing. We had a terrific superintendent who had previously been a special ed teacher who had a son with special needs. So there was a lot of reason that he had to say, sure, come on board. So when that previous advocate retired, she actually had a resource center. She donated all of the materials, her books and her videos and all that stuff, to the school district. And then I created a parent resource center out of it. And it was great. I got to be a librarian. I was like, we created this beautiful library and I worked in it. And what mostly happened was parents would come in with their issues and I would help them, and we'd sort of navigate the waters, and then I would take them to the proper place within the district to help them. So I was kind of like an ombudsman. It was wonderful. Mm-hmm. And then we started doing all kinds of other things, all kinds of community outreach and stuff. But then there was this critical point where if I talked about Orton Gillingham, the schools didn't offer it. And so there's a limit to how much I could actually do. And I realized, this is, it's not helping because I'm telling the parents what they need and they can't yet get it. So we were working behind the scenes very hard to get Orton Gillingham in and train teachers and stuff. And then that superintendent retired and everything changed. So it was a great experience in a lot of ways to really make progress and then to see how, because it wasn't codified, it changed so quickly. I mean, like overnight. So it was all a very interesting experience. Maybe I'll write a book about that someday.
There you go.
Yeah.
I love it. And can you tell me a little bit about what your son's up to? And he's 21 now, you said?
He's 21. He's working as a valet and bellman at a 5-star resort here in Santa Barbara. And so he brings home piles of money every single day. And that's a really great job for him because he loves cars. He's very good with people. It's outside, so he's moving all the time. And, it's like perfect. It's perfect. He's also taken some classes in marketing. And, before he did this, he took a gap year right after high school. And like I said, he was a really good baseball player and he intended really to go to a D1 school, but I think that we had to let go of that idea because it was just going to be too difficult for him to leave home, to experience the academic and sports pressures. So he changed his priorities some, but he's really happy and making plans. He wants to move to Montana and ride motorcycles. So I told him this morning, that's a great idea, honey. Why not?
I think that's a very dyslexic thing. Like I'm gonna, just think of this kind of out of the box thing, and because I hear that a lot, and I think like that too. So
yeah, I love it. I mean, it's really fun. Yeah,
absolutely, awesome. So I'm curious. I get a lot of parents contacting me with questions about motivation. Wondering kind of like when to be the cheerleader, when to be sort of more of the parent role, like, no, you have to do your homework, and ways to help sort of motivate their child when they're, finding it tough to do their homework or whatever it is. So what would you say to that if there's a parent in that situation?
I'm probably not the best person to ask because I do not want to be complicit in emotional damage that I think that a lot of the schools and the work does. So my perspective on that would be to look at the homework and figure out what's worthwhile doing and what's not. And then to interact with him and not just make him do it. I think, my thing is always more carrot and less stick. And it just makes me, it breaks my heart when I hear about kids crying over their homework. It's not worth it. It's just not. And, we never let our son even do the standardized testing. My husband would take him camping that week. It was like, so we have a kind of a pretty relaxed attitude about all of that stuff. And it, as I look at it now, it really doesn't matter. So I think it's like put less stress and less, importance on those assignments and recognize that you as a parent have a right to protect your child. So I think their emotional health is what matters at every point, much more than whatever. I used to tell them, I don't really care what you teach them. I can teach him. Don't hurt him. So that was my mode. Don't just keep them in protection all the time. And I don't care if they call you a helicopter parent or whatever, because they're not ready to protect themselves. So you have to do it. And the school won't protect them. So you have to make that a priority.
I love that. More carrot, less stick. It's a great way to look at
Yeah.
it. What about self-confidence? Was that something that your son struggled with? That's something that you saw a lot of parents having troubles with their kids?
Well, I think we were in a unique situation because he was in a very positive school environment and he was a very accomplished athlete. And so he got a lot of respect for what he was able to do. I do remember one time when one of our neighbor kids told him, well, you can hit a home run, but you can't read a book, and my son was devastated by that, devastated. So I just think supporting their strengths as much as possible. And then when something like that happens, you work it out and you talk about it. And, he didn't want to see that kid for a year. And I kind of understand why. And I wasn't going to make him, oh, no, you have to be with him, because I understood how deeply he was wounded by that. And, I talk to adults, up into their 80s who remember those kinds of things. So when I go into classrooms and I talk to second and third graders, I let them know about that an 80-year-old cried when she told me that kids in a classroom laughed at her. Because it's important that children understand the empathy that they need to have for their friends, and that reading doesn't equal being smart. And we've got to uncouple those two things.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
Talk to me as far as, I knew you kind of given bits and pieces, but as far as sort of general advice for a parent who's maybe dyslexia, their child was recently diagnosed, maybe they are dyslexic, but maybe they're not, and they're trying to figure out what it means for their kid. What would sort of be your advice for a parent in that situation? Apart from, I'll definitely say it, get a copy of this book for sure. But apart from that.
Thank you. One is relax. It's going to be okay because and the sooner you know, the better it is. And like I always say, look, my son couldn't read until he was in 7th grade. And really, he learned within a matter of months. So it can happen and it will happen. The most important thing is to make sure that they're not emotionally damaged. So make that a priority. Learn all you can, one, about your child's learning style, and then also about how your child is being taught to read, write, and spell, and make sure that the methods that they're using match, because you can spend years and years. I mean, that's what happened with us. It's like they were doing this one program and I finally said to them, does this program work for kids with dyslexia? And they said, no. I'm like, well, why are we doing this? So, I mean, and you do have to have the confidence to challenge, question authority. That's difficult because you might not always get true answers, but you have to really do your research. And if it means appealing to higher authority, not just talking to the teacher, but going to the principal and going up the ladder with the district, whatever you have to do, go to the media, speak out in public. You have to become an advocate, and you really have to really think about that. And if you can't do it yourself, you need to find somebody to help you, because the years pass very quickly. And, right now it's, we're talking towards the end of the year, and the school people are already thinking about the next school year. It happens so fast. So yeah, you have to get on top of it, but get some help too.
Absolutely. Awesome. And what about, can you specifically speak to, oftentimes when someone has, doesn't have a lot of experience with dyslexia or any, and their child is diagnosed, it's seen as a very negative thing. The word death sentence is often thrown around. What would you say to that?
All you have to do is just look at the examples of so many people. I always say that it's dyslexics that have moved our culture ahead. I mean, every inventor, every artist, every cool person you want to know, it seems they're dyslexic. And I think, gosh, I wish I was, It's just such great company to be in. And, with technology these days, there's been no better time to be dyslexic. So, there's some good things. And now with all this awareness and like having your show and having all these people and parents being able to connect all literally around the world is pretty fantastic. So I don't see it as a negative at all. I don't.
Awesome. I don't either. I love that. So I know there's tons of resources in this book, but are there a couple of things that you would sort of recommend as far as like, okay, this is a really good starting place, or this is a really good resource? Are there any particular things like that?
Well, I I've got the book is in three sections. It's getting oriented, then it's parents as advocates, and then it's the walk through the grades. And so I did that very specifically because you could just look at one place or another. I think it's important to have grounding in history and to know that this has been going on a long time. I think when you talk to people in schools, they act like, oh, I've never had a dyslexic child in my class before. And you go, yes. Oh, really?
Okay.
So, take the mystery out of it. And I try to empower parents with that by giving them the history and some of the important people that are really doing the research and the work. This is not an unknown area. This is very well known and it's being very well researched. The only place you won't find it is in school. So you do have to expertise yourself. Then I think that the information about how to become an advocate and what, I've got a lot of step-by-step ideas and ways to empower parents. I think that's really helpful. And then just the walk through the grades is kind of like what you could expect and how you can be proactive rather than reactive. And so I really feel that it's important that parents, be on top, not the schools. So we're the ones in charge, not the teacher or the principal.
Awesome. Yeah. And so for someone listening and saying, okay, yes, this guide sounds wonderful. Where do they get it?
Amazon. They can get it on Amazon, and it's available as in both book and ebook. So ebook is audio enabled, so if they wanted to listen to it. And then it's available. I have a website, dyslexialand.com, and that's got a lot of fun stuff on it. We do some art and some photography, and we have a big photo project called 1 in 5, and we're photographing individuals with dyslexia and making it real to people. So if anybody wants to get involved with that, they need to get in touch with me about that. And it's marketing books these days is a little challenging because there's no bookstores. So I go to events, some local events, and I'm always happy to travel. And all my dyslexia peeps across the country, we keep saying, we should get together. And it's like, yeah, let's, so maybe we'll have a big parent convention sometime. That'd be kind of cool.
There you go. That sounds wonderful. Well, Cheri, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it.
Super excited to be giving away one of Cheri's books, Dyslexia Land, the field guide for parents. Let's say the third person. The third person who emails me at dyslexia is our superpower, all one word, at gmail.com. That's dyslexia is our superpower, all one word, at gmail.com. And good luck. And like I said, the third person.
Thanks for listening to the Dyslexia is Our Superpower podcast, and we'd love to hear from you with comments and questions, so please feel free to get in touch. You can email us at dyslexiaisoursuperpower@gmail.com. That's dyslexiaisoursuperpower, all one word, @gmail.com. And don't forget to spread the word by sharing us on social media.